What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host, Pete Rogers, and I am joined by my fellow nerds. We have resident old man Clark Barnes and the working girl Jordan Smith. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing
Doing
great, Pete.
excellent.
Excellent. We're going to jump right into football talk because I honestly don't know if there's ever been a more wild and crazy and insane NFL trade deadline than what just occurred. And so we're just going to jump right into that because there is a lot to break down. I don't know what was more insane, you guys, the NFL trade deadline or me listening to my own scared advice last week and benching Christian McCaffrey against the Rams for him to go off and do the trifecta. So love that. Love that for me. Luckily, I still won, but not great.
Well, we're all about taking one for the greater team. That's why last week I finally benched Kyle Pitts. So you're all
I did too. Put in Irv Smith, and then yes, that was delightful for everyone because Kyle Pitts decided that yes, now is the time to play football. But anyways, wow. So many trades went down at the NFL trade deadline. We're going to try to touch on at least all of the offensive ones that have fantasy relevance. We can discuss defensive ones as well if you guys want to. I think the first place to start, obviously, if you want to, Nick over on the Nerding Out podcast has already broken down the Christian McCaffrey trade. We've already talked about that too, I feel like a little bit, as well as what went down before the actual trade deadline. And that was Kadarius Toney getting traded out of New York to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I feel like you guys, Clark, you talked about how everyone has you to thank for benching Kyle Pitts. Everyone has us to thank for that trade since we were the ones on the show to be like, let's see if we can get Kadarius Toney out of New York. And you know what? Personally, I don't think that there's a better landing spot for him than the Chiefs. Given what we've seen in this offense before, we know what Andy Reid can conjure up. And Kadarius Toney is such a yards after carry, just like freak, for lack of a better word. And in this offense with Andy Reid scheming up plays and Patrick Mahomes under center, like, I don't know, Clark, is there a better opportunity for us to see Kadarius Toney be the player we thought he could be than in Kansas City?
I don't think so. I mean, there's 3 or 4 offenses in the league where we could have a debate. Green Bay really needs someone and has a good quarterback. The Rams could use some help, but I think Kansas City is the most exciting. There's the need, and what excites me the most about this is I drafted Toney and was excited about him because I saw the 2-game sample and was like, this guy is an absolute stud and this is going to be fantastic. We also learned when this trade went down that Toney has not been injured and that was just the Giants lying because they did not want to play him. So it was apparently a healthy Kadarius Toney going to the Chiefs. It'll probably be a couple of weeks. I feel like it's probably easier for a running back to come in and have immediate success than it is for a wide receiver. But there's such a need to get Toney out there. And if he gives us half of what we saw from him last year with Daniel Jones at quarterback, it's exciting.
It's very exciting. Jordan, what's your feeling for Toney fantasy-wise moving forward?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, I took the headphones out. I really like it because when you got to watch Kadarius Toney play, this is the instance of you need to have your film work match what you can see on the stat sheet. And in this case, the film looked much better than what we had seen on his production because when you watch him, the dude is just like a gyro ball. He's like a thinner Golden Tate where he's just going to get extra yards, going to get positive yardage, and he's going into an offense where we already know they can push the ball down the field. But if they have somebody like Kadarius Toney who you just have to kind of keep an eye on offense, like he might be used on like jet sweeps or out of the backfield in the slot, just getting passes under 5 yards, bubble screens. But you still have to then also worry while he's potentially catching a pass 5 yards deep, like Juju Smith-Schuster is 15 yards down the field. MVS is 30 yards down the field. Like they're still going to be moving the ball
Oh, and Travis Kelce is
laterally
lurking over the middle.
Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot about their best pass catcher, Travis Kelce, was still there. It'll be fun. The only issue I think from a fantasy standpoint is figuring out who rises to the top in this offense, because there's only one football. To borrow a basketball adage, there's only one football and only so many targets to go around. We shall see.
Yeah, and we have seen in the past, like during the Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, years, we've seen this offense really funnel through two players, and it seems like the Chiefs offense has been really successful this season, kind of spreading the ball around more. And so it'll be interesting to see, not saying Kadarius Toney is going to suddenly come in and demand a, 26 or 27% target share, but with someone who they traded a 3rd round pick for, like that's a bit of capital to invest in this guy who profiles very physically similarly, I would say, to Tyreek Hill. Obviously not the like elite speed, but is an extremely shifty player who's hard to bring down. Like, it'll be interesting to see whether or not this offense stays spreading the ball around and kind of where the touches go, or if we see it eventually maybe kind of like funnel down into a Travis Kelce and Kadarius Toney. That would be the only person who I would think, considering Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS and who else is there? But I don't know, the one Mecole Hardman have kind of had their opportunity to be that funnel and have not lived up to the challenge. 2 other wide receivers got traded at the deadline. Chase Claypool went to the Bears, finally getting some receiver help for Justin Fields, who's been balling out. And then a player who we're not going to see this year, but we will see next year, Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars. The Jaguars getting Trevor Lawrence, maybe a true number 1 wide receiver for 2023. Jordan, what do you think about those?
So to plug some upcoming work, I actually do have an article I'm working on, winners and losers for your dynasty football leagues at this trade deadline.
Love it.
One of the winners was Justin Fields, because of the Chase Claypool trade. It's not a trade that is going to turn the Bears somehow into a playoff contender or get them, to the top of the NFC North. They've been selling off parts. They traded Robert Quinn last week. They traded away Roquan Smith. So they know that they're not ready, but they need to figure out what they have in Justin Fields. Justin Fields, his game has improved vastly over the past 2 to 3 weeks. He's a much better player now that they are starting to use him more effectively, let's say. We're talking more designed runs and just being able to run the offense much better than they were at the beginning of the season. And hey, maybe a part of that was just because it was the beginning of the season and sometimes we get a little bit too worked up at that part of the year. But adding Chase Claypool adds a dynamic downfield threat for them. Claypool does have some issues high pointing the ball sometimes, but Justin Fields throws a much prettier deep ball than anybody who was there with him during his time at Pittsburgh. Ben Roethlisberger he was off the cliff. The mushroom cloud was coming up and we could see it from miles away. The cliff he already hit it. Mitch Trubisky, we know. Kenny Pickett
never climbed the cliff.
He kind of started to get something a little bit going with Kenny Pickett, but not so much on the deep, big plays. So this is a move for 2023. They need to see if Justin Fields is truly the guy, and they can't do that. Note to other offenses with young QBs out there, you can't do that when you draft your quarterback and you don't have anything else in place yet. You can't understand what type of player they can be. So that's why I like this trade a lot, is because they get a young Chase Claypool that could work out great. Darnell Mooney moves to wide receiver 2 in the offense, which is much better suited for him. And then they get to see whether or not they need to go ahead and draft Anthony Richardson next year or CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Like this is it. This is the window. Look for the Bears to start working that offense.
Yeah, I was high on both these guys, so I've just been holding them and wishing and hoping. Obviously, with Calvin Ridley and Dynasty, knowing it's going to going to take the year off. For both these guys, I got so excited. I was like, oh man, Chase Claypool got traded. That's awesome. To the Bears. Crap. Like, okay, out of the frying pan into the frying pot. I mean, Kenny Pickett was picking it up with Chase Claypool a little bit. Justin Fields has looked great for the past couple of games. We'll see if that continues. I hope it does. Claypool's a giant freak wide receiver who is young and has a lot to work on in his game. I think him and Mooney being on the same field will be good for both of those receivers and for Justin Fields. Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars. Boy,
Clark loves it.
We'll see next year. I mean, it's a good move for the Jaguars, I think. Question mark?
It's going to be interesting. Quickly, we talked about Darnell Mooney. This is, for the time being, for the rest of this season, I do think it's a slight hit. He is I would call him a loser in this trade, just simply because of the fact that he was wide receiver like 5, tied with Drake London in terms of target share this season, with 27.5% of the Bears targets, which are few and far between to begin with. But obviously adding Chase Claypool, that number is going to diminish. And so an already kind of fringe flex wide receiver 4 in Darnell Mooney is probably going to only remain, if not decrease. But has there ever been such a clear or like hyped up, like this is a generational talent, Trevor Lawrence, whom we still have yet to really see put it together for an extended period of time? Like, it's going to be really interesting next year to see, with Calvin Ridley, with Christian Kirk, who's been having a great season, with Travis Etienne, like, what is this offense actually going to look like? And is Trevor Lawrence the golden boy, truly the golden boy?
Yeah, we see this a lot. And this is my favorite thing during the draft process, is we act as though every pick is just going to be absolutely perfect. Like, Jameis Winston was the promised child. How's that worked out? Marcus Mariota was the promised child. How's that worked out? Mitch Trubisky, I mean, there are more, I think there's more quarterbacks who get drafted in the first round that fail than are good. Now, Lawrence is special because, national title, those beautiful flowing locks, when some owners speak from the 30s about what they want their franchise quarterback to look like, it's Trevor Lawrence.
That is the Adonis of the quarterback.
Yeah. And he's just he's not good. Maybe he'll turn it around. Like, Josh Allen has ruined my quarterback analysis.
It's so
because
true.
He looked so terrible for years, and then he just figured it out. So maybe Trevor Lawrence will figure it out. He certainly has not yet.
Yeah. That is a fair assessment. Sticking in the NFC North, Jordan, when this trade went down, I have to say, I literally stared at my screen for probably 30 minutes, just making sure that this was an actual trade that went down between division rivals, the Lions trading TJ Hockenson to the Vikings, which, I don't know, Jordan, you're plugged into the NFC North. Was there anything that like made this feel like coming? Like it was about to occur? Because to me, I was just like, whoa, this is a wild Madden trade that never happens in real life.
I think that sometimes when you're a fan of a football team, like a diehard fan, you know how you feel about other divisional opponents. Like me and my friends, we don't really, that are Packer fans, I should say, we don't mesh well with Bears fans. Vikings fans, we have a few of them in our lives and we can, be a little bit more cordial. Lions, for the past 2 decades, they've kind of just been over there. So we've been friendly with them, but you never really think about the interactions of like, how do Minnesota and Detroit Lions fans get along? Because they're kind of like the Super Bowl-less younger brother, sister of the NFC North, because you have the Packers and Bears who are like 150 years old or whatever the hell. So I think maybe, I don't know, maybe there was a little bit of commiseration there.
They're like, we feel your pain. We're going to give you this top end tight end for a 3rd round pick.
The shade. This is so great.
There's a lot of like, with every trade, people try to pick the winner and the loser. But I think what made this the most palatable for an in-division trade is that it kind of seems like a win-win for both. Like the Vikings get to replace their tight end position because Irv Smith Jr. just went on IR, and then the Lions get a couple draft picks. They're not doing as hot as we would have expected coming out of Hard Knocks, but they're still definitely a couple years away. They're still rebuilding, and I like the Lions getting more draft picks because I like the way they've drafted recently. So yeah, I kind of think it's a win-win. I don't know. Maybe I should think of it as a big lose or a big loss because I'm a Packers fan, but I don't know. It's a win-win for both teams, I think.
A very quiet Packers fan, Packers team, might I add. Clark, you're a resident tight ends man. What do you think for Hockenson moving forward?
Hockenson's promise has not been realized, as happens unfortunately with too many awesome tight end prospects. He is moving to an offense that can take advantage of the tight end, I think, better than Detroit has so far. Detroit's offense is explosive, but Hockenson had one big game and that's about it. I think this is an opportunity for both sides to win. It's not really, they didn't pay out of the nose for Hockenson, and there is a clear need in Minnesota for a good blocking all around tight end. So we'll see how it goes. If I have Hockenson in fantasy, I'm excited that this move has happened.
Yeah, no, I especially shifting to an offense that has much more consistently been explosive this season. Like the Lions have their games and look absolutely incredible and unstoppable. And Hockenson had one of those games, but even when the Lions offense was really truly clicking, it wasn't, Hockenson was not like the number two. It still works through Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's literally has a mansion built on the moon right now because this man is about to see literally every other target from Jared Goff moving forward for the rest of the season. And then through DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. We also had some running backs move around. I'll just list them off, and Clark, you tell me what you want to talk about. We had Nyheim Hines to the Bills, and in return, the Colts got Zach Moss and some other picks. Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins after they traded Chase Edmonds to the Broncos. Some running backs getting swapped around here. Clark, what do you like?
I think the most interesting one is Jeff Wilson now the best running back in Miami?
Is he? Is this just destroy all Raheem Mostert stock that I have invested in?
He goes back to backing up Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson is a serviceable running back. If you're serviceable on the Dolphins, we've seen what Raheem Mostert can do. I think that's really the most interesting thing here. I think if you're slow to respond to news on your fantasy teams like I am sometimes, you just happened to keep Jeff Wilson. And now that he's going to Miami, it breathes a little bit of life back into that player because the Miami passing offense has just been absolutely crushing it. But they want to run the ball. So this is another guy who goes to a system he's familiar with in Miami that could end up being a really solid flex play, like very low end RB2. So that's what I'm excited about.
Especially going to an offense that's going to score points. And we've seen Jeff Wilson kind of went in his time with 49ers, monopolize that goal line work. That was, Shanahan's role for him. And he did an excellent job about that.
And Hines to Buffalo is obviously crazy interesting, but I just have no clue what that's.
Yeah. Pour some out for everyone who invested in Cook's brother, James Cook. Poor Clarky.
I'm putting it myself super hard right now.
Poor Clark Burns.
I'm going to agree with Clark. Like, my favorite move out of all the running back ones is Jeff Wilson Jr., just because I think he has the best chance to become a starting running back again, or at least a better chance to split carries evenly and have the production be more of a 1A, 1B type of thing. Because in San Francisco, that just was not going to happen. I think Kyle Shanahan got a hold of Christian McCaffrey and he's like, oh, hell yeah.
This is fun.
The first full game he has Christian McCaffrey after he's able to study the full playbook. Like we said last week on the podcast, they went to the back few pages and he threw
well, you heard, I know you've heard the story about that one, Jordan.
What do you mean?
That Shanahan like evidently reached out to the running back coaches and was just like, hey, is there anything fun we could do? And they're like, well, Christian McCaffrey threw a 30-yard bomb back in high school. And they're like, awesome. Draw it up. We're doing this.
That's what you love to see. I love when they're like, oh yeah, he played a little quarterback in high school. Let's get him out on the edge.
Let's do this. Let's do a bootleg and just toss it.
The Niners, for whatever reason, also aren't using Deebo Samuel as much in the run. But I think when it came down to it, those are like two studs you have to compete with for touches. Now, at least in the running game. Now, I don't think Chase Edmonds is that big of a threat. And this is also like the second move at the position, second big move that Miami has made at the running back position. So I think they're still clearly trying to look for something. And if Jeff Wilson can deliver that, then that's great. I hope you held on to your Jeff Wilson.
I mean, everyone was so hyped on Chase Edmonds. I mean, myself included. I hyped him up a lot. Excuse me. Because Miami gave him, he was their highest paid running back in that backfield. They gave him good deep money to come in free agency, and them trading him to the Broncos is just kind of, you're right, Jordan. They're still looking to figure out what this backfield is. And I do think that this is Kyle Shanahan throwing a bone for arguably his favorite player on the team and Jeff Wilson and being like, hey, we're going to send you to an offense that, in a backfield that's very up for grabs, and go score double-digit touchdowns. And for fantasy managers, you're going to love to see that. Absolutely love to see it. NFL, quickly, Roger Goodell. I don't know if you pulled all of the owners into a secret meeting and was like, hey guys, we need to compete with the NBA trade deadline. Let's fucking make some trades. 10 out of 10. Do this again. The fact that we had so many teams, and maybe this is their whole quest for parity, is that you have so many teams that are around 500 that you had teams actually making difference-making trades because everyone's kind of in it. And there were teams that went and were aggressive, gave up picks to go get pieces that could change their season moving forward. I mean, the Dolphins, we haven't even touched on Bradley Chubb going to the Dolphins, which is a huge defensive piece for them. And that's going to be something to watch. And Roquan Smith to the Ravens on the defensive end, there was just so much that went down. And I personally absolutely love it. 10 out of 10. Do it again every year.
I want to echo that super hard. And it makes so much sense in the NFL where, a fourth, fifth, sixth round pick really is something. I mean, in the NBA, a good team trading their first round pick means nothing. Right. The 23rd pick in the NBA draft, generally, and I'm not an expert, it's generally not that coveted. But fourth round picks in the NFL, it's another shot you get to take at someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Ravens trading for Roquan Smith while
they don't have wide
Devin Duvernay as their number one, who I like, by the way. I like Devin Duvernay. That is the most Ravens thing in Ravens history.
It's so Raven. That's so Raven. It's going to all come back to bite them when Lamar Jackson hits free agency and makes $1 bajillion going to play for, I don't know.
I just want to say this. I want to make sure that I've said this out loud. While it would really hurt me as a football fan to not see Lamar Jackson play next year, to see Lamar Jackson not play on the franchise tag next year, I think it would be good for football. I mean, it's Lamar Jackson's money, it's his life. Obviously, he should do what he thinks is best for him. I don't care. But I hate the franchise tag, and that the Ravens know that they're not going to pay him and they're going to franchise tag him for 2 more years. Pull a Bo Jackson, man. Yeah. Just withdraw your services.
Yep.
Anyway. Hey, if Kirk Cousins can play the franchise tag game, Lamar Jackson is a much better player at that game. He could build 30 mil, 40 mil a year for the next 4 years if he wanted to. He doesn't even need to sign a contract.
Yeah.
He would hold them. He would be in a LeBron situation where he'd be holding the franchise hostage. Hey,
he'd be 50% of their cap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be man.
They're gonna sign Westbrook and
a lot of good narratives heading into this offseason. All right, talked about the deadline. I feel like we covered it. Covered it pretty well. Before we get into our week 9 must starts, I have another Dwight Schrute fact of the week for you guys. Again, in riddle form. I want to know Here are the top 4 quarterbacks in terms of neck rating. Number 1, and neck rating is our in-house consistency and efficiency metric that our own Patty Cooper tracks and measures. So these are the top 4 guys. Number 1 is Josh Allen. Number 2 is Jalen Hurts. Number 3 is blank. And number 4 is Patrick Mahomes. I want you guys to guess who number 3 is. Who is the 3rd most consistent and efficient quarterback in fantasy football so far this season?
Wait, who's number 2?
Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts.
So it's tricky is consistent and efficient does not mean good or high scoring.
Good thought, Clark. That's a good thing. Good clarification.
Is it I'm going to guess Derek Carr.
That is not a bad guess. Let's bring up. He was in the top for a while now, and I think his efficiency has gone down in recent weeks. Let's see where he currently ranks in neck rating. That is not the answer, but Derek Carr is QB. He has pooped the bed in good old QBR, or not QBR, in terms of neck rating. He's about average. He's mid to the pack now.
The Raiders have been a hilarious mess.
Yeah, Josh McDaniels, not a good head coach. Who
is it? Gino?
Who? Gino?
No,
not a bad guess either. Gino is also slightly above Derek Carr, but he's still middle of the pack. Gino was doing exceptionally well, was leading neck rating, but then has had kind of a few iffy games and inefficient games. No, I'll give you. Anyone want a final guess before I tell?
Tua.
Again, Tua is one of the rare. Tua has a terrible neck rating because of the fact that he's had 2 games of like 35 plus points, and then everything else is like 15. And so his standard deviation is just skewed to high held. No, the number 3 quarterback in terms of neck rating is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy G gets you basically exactly what he does every game, which is what? He is the QB. I should know this. I have him as my starting quarterback in my home league because I did not draft quarterback well. Jimmy G, quarterback 19. He's basically gotten you 17 points every single week this year. So he's the last 4 weeks, he has thrown for 240 plus yards and 2 touchdowns in every single game. So there you go. Mr. Consistency, Jimmy G. Clark loves that fact. Clark's a big Jimmy G fan.
I've got him. I mean, I'm rolling him out there.
Not saying no.
I'm already Trey Lancing for next year, so it's going to be a fun off season.
I hope Trey Lance works. Let's do some week 9 must starts. Clark, why don't you start us off? Who's a player you're having everyone start this week in fantasy football?
So he's already kind of a lower end running back too, but this is just absolutely matchup based. Miles Sanders and the Philadelphia Eagles are taking on we just gave up 400 yards and 6 touchdowns to Derrick Henry Houston Texans. So, I mean, good DFS play, good, it has been boom and bust for Sanders. You have to make sure he's in your lineup this week.
I absolutely agree. I love that call. He has been a very surprising running back this season. I feel like I have him in my dynasty league, and I am quite pleased with what the season he's put together after, it's not that he's quite achieving the level of fantasy stardom that I think people expected from coming from his rookie year. His involvement in the passing game has been completely negligible, but he's been efficient on the ground. And you're right, Clark, in this matchup against the Houston Texans, like last week against the Steelers, he only had 9 carries, but he turned that into 78 yards and a touchdown. So I think even if he's not going to get a huge amount of work, he's proven to be efficient enough that he can turn just a few touches into a very solid fantasy week.
Yeah, I also like that the Eagles, who I believe they were in some rumors or some conversations to be adding some more pieces on offense, but they didn't. So I like that for consistency, at least for Miles Sanders, and he's been having a good year. So yeah, that's great.
I feel like they were one of the favorites to get Kareem Hunt. Maybe I'm wrong, but that shows, if they were involved in that discussion and they didn't, they stick with Miles Sanders, show some confidence and faith in him. One of my must starts this week is a guy who we've touched on a lot so far this episode, but I have to give a shout out. It's a very special shout out to Justin Fields, who since week 5 has been the QB2 in fantasy football. He's QB7 in net rating, and he's the QB3 in non-passing points per game. He's averaging 7.3 fantasy points per game just with his legs. And if you just look at his box score, you can see that he has been over the last, 4 games, over the last 3 games, really 3 games, he's rushed for 88 yards, 82 yards and a touchdown, and then 60 yards and a touchdown. And he's going up against a Dolphins defense who are allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. But the thing that I like the most, the sauciest point about this, even with their improved defense, 5th most rushing yards to quarterbacks, 5.65 yards per attempt, which also ranks 5th. So I think we've talked about this a lot too, how the Bears are starting to use Justin Fields in the way that he should be used, which is getting him running and getting him utilizing his legs, and against the defense that has been vulnerable to that this season. I like Justin Fields to continue being a top, QB1 option in fantasy.
I love it. I love that he is blossoming. We like to talk about whether or not we think these people are going to be good. I think almost everybody on the podcast wants players to succeed and be good, unless they are
Jordan sometimes is like
people.
Jordan is pretty negative over there in his little corner.
The subtle shade thrown on Vikings and Detroit fans being irrelevant to the concerns of the Packers.
He doesn't even care about them.
Yeah.
That wasn't shade. That was being nice.
That makes it even better. But Fields is playing well. We know he has potential. We know he has had almost nothing to work with other than a running game that's starting to come online. So, hopefully this is a real step forward and not just a fluky kind of 4 or 5 games, because, man, the NFL needs good quarterbacks, and Fields looks like he could answer the mail.
Boy, do they. Yeah, there was such a promise for a big old – we got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, we got Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. There was quite the crop of young quarterbacks that came in. Everyone was like, oh, yeah, the NFL is set for years to come. And, never count your quarterbacks before they hatch. I think that's the saying.
The last 3 games, Justin Fields has had 20 consecutive points, which is 20 plus fantasy points, which is good enough for me to get the start, I would say, because it can be difficult, especially if you're in a scoring system where passing touchdowns count as 4 points. Looking at his game lines too, I feel like he's leaving some fantasy points on the board by not getting enough passing yards, and I'm hoping that's what the Clay Chaypool that dynamic will help get him and bump that yards per game average up and get him closer to 24, 25 points on the week.
Yeah. Quickly, I just want to say too, a little bit of waiver wire assistance for those out there. Clark, you were talking about this developing backfield. This developing backfield is going to be led by Khalil Herbert for the rest of the season. If he is available in your leagues, you go get him. This man has been nothing but consistently efficient this season and is averaging almost a fantasy point per touch, which ranks top 5 among running backs. So he has proven that time and time again throughout this season, he is wildly efficient when he gets touches, and he gets touches in high leverage situations, and he produces. So running backs don't matter. Is that what you were saying, Jordan?
No, I said they're back.
They're back. They do matter.
They're important in fantasy again.
Yeah, and unlike the Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott situation, Herbert is big enough to do what Montgomery does well. And I like Montgomery. I think that he's very good. I'll be very interested in where he goes next year, because the Bears are not going to need to bring him back because of Herbert. I think if I'm a coach and I'm not a fantasy football nerd, I would, with these guys, never go more than 55-45 or 60-40, because Montgomery's still good. But Herbert has shown, man, he is just super explosive.
Yeah.
Should get him the ball.
Jordan, who's a must start for you this week?
My must start this week, I am going to give some love to Deontay Foreman, the number 5 running back on the week last week. He kind of usurped Chuba Hubbard, who was nursing an injury. But I think just based on the way he ran, you're going to be excited to have him in your starting lineup. I don't know if you'll put up 31 fantasy points,
What?
again, which, I mean, it was an insane week for running backs overall. Like, I can't believe he wasn't the top producing running back, but you just
The
had
fact
some
that we
other
had like what
big
4 running
guns.
backs score 3 touchdowns in 1 week is wild. Jordan's right, man. The running backs are back, baby.
A wild time. Deontay Foreman, we've seen him come in and take over a backfield. Just last season, we saw him produce really well for the Titans when Derrick Henry went down, and the kid just really he seizes the opportunity. I feel like he is a good running back who's never really latched onto a team, but when he does, he's like, I am going to make every last moment count. I'm going to fight for every inch, and he's a big running back, so he gets better as the game goes on. What's great is that this week the Carolina Panthers play the Cincinnati Bengals, and we saw what Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt did to them on Monday night. So, yeah, I think you can plug in Deontay Foreman and be pretty confident in him putting up a pretty decent game again.
Yeah, I love it. I love that pick, and I love that play. I have earned a lot of good husband points because whilst I was just taking a glance at my wife's fantasy roster, quickly snagged Donta Foreman off of waivers and started him. And now I'm in her good graces.
You didn't do it yourself. That's a winning play.
I know. I'm here for the long haul. This is a lot. This is a dynasty marriage, and I gotta survive.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, sometimes people pop off for giant games and are never heard from again. I don't think that'll happen. PJ Walker gives the Panthers a little bit more juice. He at least is going to throw the ball out there for his receivers to make plays. And, the Panthers are a lot more exciting now.
Hey, remember when we talked about the beginning of the podcast about quarterbacks who were highly touted and then did absolutely nothing in the league? The Panthers got both of them. Let's talk about Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold becoming non-existent quarterbacks in this league. Good Lord. PJ Walker outplaying them. I mean, good for PJ Walker. Well done, man. Talk about another player who takes his opportunities.
Yeah, I like that PJ Walker just shows up every couple seasons and balls for a few games.
Yeah, like, just does his shit.
PJ Walker.
Love it. I have one more must start. A guy who I feel like has been quietly just very solid, and that's Terry McLaurin. He's the wide receiver 16 in per rating, averaging 1.58 fantasy points per target, and he's a top 5 wide receiver in our net consistency rating. And I think the thing that really, I don't know if it's gone under the radar, but I feel like it hasn't gotten the national pub that it deserves, probably because it's, Washington, and there's a lot going on in Washington, D.C. right now. Not football related, but also football related. But he's had back-to-back games against shutdown shadow cornerbacks and has produced like high levels of production. He played Jair Alexander back in week 7. Yep. Who's allowing a 58.3 QPR quarterback rating this year. Terry McLaurin, 5 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Next week, Stephon Gilmore, 75 quarterback rating, 6 catches, 113 yards. And now he gets to play the Vikings, who are giving up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And they just got absolutely eviscerated by DeAndre Hopkins coming back after 6 weeks of not playing football, 12 catches, 159 yards, and a touchdown. I think Terry McLaurin has just been like very quietly a set it and forget it wide receiver 2 this season. And in a plus matchup, like this could be a week that he again kind of maybe performs high-end wide receiver 2, fringe wide receiver 1. Certainly a guy who I think you should be plugging into your lineup every week, but this week especially given the positive matchup.
Yeah, every now and then you get like this rare special opportunity on an NFL Sunday to watch a player just kind of elevate. It's like they go Super Saiyan and you're watching it in real time, and then they just carry that on for a couple of games. Something happened in the second half of that Packers-Washington game where Terry McLaurin just decided he was going to elevate. Like he was just going to take the next step midway through the game. The touchdown that he caught on Jair Alexander, this is going to sound like an apologist take, but Jair Alexander was playing really good defense all day long. The touchdown that Terry McLaurin caught, I didn't think he caught that pass. Like, it was an incredible catch by him. He like mossed Stephon Gilmore last week
for the win.
Yeah, for the win. He's playing outside of his mind with Taylor Heineke as his quarterback. I don't know if he decided, hey, Taylor Heineke is my quarterback. I gotta step it up a little bit. But he's turned it on, and I don't think he's turning it off anytime soon. So yeah, plug Terry McLaurin in wide receiver 1.
Yeah, we love ourselves some scary Terry on this podcast.
And it's an important thing to remember for next year when we're drafting. Terry McLaurin, we knew he was going to be on a bad team, but we knew that he was fantastic. And so he's that 4th, 5th round pick where you just put him in and you don't worry about it when he gets 4 points, because Carson Wentz only has eyes for Jahan Dotson in the red zone. And you just know that he's super good. He's got some warts. Don't worry about it. Relax. He's fine. I have a wild ass guess must start. And that's Juju Smith-Schuster. He's got a 2 games in a row with a touchdown streak coming off the bye. I know Kadarius Toney is in town and they play in some similar spots in the field, but I just want Juju to have a good game. So I'm putting it out there that I think he's going to have a good game this week.
I don't hate it. Plus, it could be just that, we have seen like Juju Smith-Schuster. It's not as though Juju Smith-Schuster can't produce fantasy numbers while sharing the field with other elite wide receivers. Like he did it all throughout Pittsburgh while sharing a field with Antonio Brown before CTE got the better of him. Like we know that Juju can put forward fantasy numbers. And I think, you said it at the beginning, I think Clark too, where it's like this addition of Kadarius Toney and what he brings to the team could really open up the field for all of the Chiefs pass catches. Is just how they spread the ball around. But I like the call. A shot in the dark, and sometimes a shot in the dark hits the intended target.
And what are we doing with Isaiah Pacheco this week?
Oh, good question. Not touching him.
I'm going for it.
What's going on?
What is going on? Because he is starting, but then also Clyde Edwards-Helaire still basically gets. I don't know. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has also just been so efficient this season. He's a top running back in terms of per rating. I mean, he's averaging over a fantasy point per touch this season, and it's like I'll be curious to see after a bye week. If Isaiah Pacheco starts again, if he's still their starting running back, and B, if that role increases, because it didn't seem like he exactly got all that much work over Clyde Edwards-Helaire or over Jerick McKinnon, who's somehow still prevalent in this offense.
I'm just really starting to think that maybe Andy Reid lucked into Brian Westbrook all those years ago. That really starting to think about it.
Well, Jamal Charles too. He did luck into him, but boy, he knew what to do with him. I mean, Jamal Charles won me one of my first fantasy championships and went on to be the first player I ranked number 1 overall who went on to not play one snap that entire season. So a lot of good memories with Andy Reid running backs.
See, KC has a storied tradition of good fantasy running backs. Like Priest Holmes, Larry Johnson, Jamal Charles. They were just all really fun. And now.
And next up, Isaiah Pacheco.
This long lineage of top fantasy backs, it's Isaiah Pacheco. You can mark that down. Put it in your, put it on record. That's my beautiful voice. That's all we got for you this week. Make sure you rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice, and go follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself on Twitter at Peter M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark, and Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. And of course, make sure you check out all the amazing content we're putting out over on the site at NerdBallFF.com. Jordan's going to be dropping trade deadlines, winners and losers for your dynasty team. I got the week 9 volatility index, safe and risky starts and sits coming out this week, coming out tomorrow, I believe, actually. And so make sure you're going reading those articles and getting ready for week 9. Until next week, my fellow nerds.